Hello, my name is Brian Bittner, and I'm an online student at the Flatiron School, and I would like to show you guys my Ruby Gem CLI. It's a menu that the user can bring up to show the status of all the subway lines, the MTA, and that New York City has. Um, So this is sort of the file structure. Maybe we can just run it through just to see its functionality. Excuse me, I need to go into a different folder. Sorry. Okay, here we are. Cool. List all those projects so we can see what we're looking at. NYC autocomplete. Great. Now you can run the executable file in the bin folder. And so this should be scraping the MTA website now. Okay, great. So now we have all these different line objects in a list for us. Each line object has a name, status, and details, which we can access by selecting from the menu here. So just to show, like if we try to break this, if we try to enter a number that's not in the list, so like 13, we only have 11 items, the CLI will inform the user that it's not an option, and to try again, and it will display the options to the user again. So let's see, we've got service change, planned work. Now let's check out what the 1, 2, 3 line is doing. So we're going to see some of these status details because service change doesn't really give us a lot of information. So let's see what that does. Okay, cool. So it brought us directly to the content on the MTA website that gives us the specific details for the 1, 2, 3 train, and the user can, make their travel plans considering that information. Cool. And then another cool feature is that we're able to say the user ran this maybe a while ago, and then now they got caught up, but now they want to leave and they want to make sure that the status hasn't changed. We can refresh the list by typing L. And we'll see in the CLI how it will completely clear out all the objects and generate new ones with new information. And then we'll have timestamps posted at the bottom so we can verify when the program was run. Great. So let's check out the code. Using Atom editor here. So let's go through the point entry through the CLI. All right. So when the executable is run, call will run and it'll do these methods, list trains, and train details. So here is our header that should be familiar. We're using the colorized gem to get some different colors in here. Even with the first initialization, this is where we'll see in the line class how everything will get cleared out. Our all class variable will be set to an empty array. Next, the subway status will get lines that will involve our scraping. We're going to set a class variable for the CLI called lines, and it's going to contain all of our line objects that we've created in line 13 here. And then we'll go through some iteration to output a number in order with the line name and the line status. And then at the end, as you saw, we have our timestamp. Cool. So now we have our list of trains that comes up, and then train detail. So this provides the interactivity for the user to select more specific details about each of these lines. So what we have here are while the input is nil, we have a loop running. So while our input is not Q, which is the signal to quit and end the program, it puts out this information from the user to enter a number, L to refresh the list, or Q to quit. We're going to get the input from the user, and then we have some conditional statements depending on what the user inputs as to what the program does. So what this does, it's a conditional. So if the input is in a number that is within the range of our generated list, this number could vary, as I'll show in our line class, because the MTA API, the website, has the ability to check the status of not only subway lines, but the bridges, the buses, Metro North, Long Island Railroad. So this CLI could be adapted to check the status of any of those different modes of transportation provided by the MTA. So this allows it to be adaptable, and we're not hard-coded to a specific number of list items. It can be variable depending on how many line objects we create in the line class. So we're going to put the line details, and we'll see what details are, and which is going to be a URL. So now we have some syntax here on line 35 that will open up that URL, and that's what we saw when we selected details for the 123 line, where it opened up the specific content on the MTA webpage for that line. So else if we want to refresh the list, we hit L, that pops us back up to list trains. We'll clear out all of our objects and reinitialize them so we get fresh data. I had an issue when I was developing this where I would refresh this list, and without this line of code, as you may probably know, it would just double and double the size of our collection. So with subway lines, there's 11 of them. So the first time it would run would be 11, second time would be 22. So this line of code is important in order to clear out our old data and provide us with some new data. All right, so coming on back down. All right, and our next is this else if statement on line 38. If we have a quit, we go to goodbye, and the goodbye is defined as, it puts a message here, telling the user goodbye. And if anything else gets put in, if the user puts anything else that doesn't fit any of these other conditions, we'll ask the user to try again. Great. Moving on to the line class, which is where a lot of this action happens with the website. So we have our class defined with attribute accessors. So each line instance will have a name, a status, and details. The URL that we're using to scrape is a XML readable version of the MTA website, which looks something like this. Okay, so this is where we're able to identify our different tags to grab the different attributes we want for our classes, class instances. Excuse me. So we have some boilerplate kind of stuff here. We have our all class variable, so allow us to make a collection of all of our line class instances. We're able to return this variable with the self.all method here. We also have a save method, so as we are creating each of our line classes, we're able to populate them into this previously empty container. And then here is our clearing out function, which allows us to refresh the list and dump our old data and replace it with new data. So I'm going to skip the get lines method. We'll come back to that because it pulls on these methods here. So this is where the scraping happens. uh, setting up an empty array, collecting, opening up Nokoguri, open up our URL that we listed above, and we're going through that URL and we're finding all the text that has this name tag, and we're only going to collect the first 11, right? And then as we do that, each one that we collect, we're going to keep in this names kind of holder, right? Okay, same thing, similar thing with the status here, except we are collecting everything, all the text that has the status tag, all right? So now we have, two different arrays here with names and a status, and I'll show you how the details work in our other one. Another thing I want to mention is that these ranges here, 0 to 10, the MTA website provides information on not just the subway, as I've mentioned, but buses, bridges, Long Island Railroad, and Metro North. So if we wanted to change this CLI in order to provide information about these, we could just change these ranges to these items. Additionally, we could adapt the CLI to have different classes for each one of these modes of transportation. We could have NYC subway status bridges. I mean, we might rename the top level, but for the CLI, I focused on the subway lines. Okay, great. So this is where we zip everything together in the self.getLines. We're using the names array size as a way to set up our range or our number to run our loop on, because that's how many objects we want to create. Because for each name we have a status, and we're going to have a details. Okay, so as we run the loop, we're going to go through our names array that we generate with our get names here, and we're going to collect a line name and a line status, and then here is where we bring in the line details. So what I figured out is that each of these specific URLs for each line name has this structure. So this remains the same, and then we're just using interpolation to put each name at the end of this content change at the end of the chain at the end of the URL. So that way we can generate our specific URLs to view the status details of each line object. So our loop continues on. So now that we have a name, a status, and a details, we're going to bring it all together into a line object, initialized with new, self.new, and we're going to set the name, so our line name variables that we have here, and just our temporary variable, line status, and line details. So now we have all the attributes for our new object, and then we will save it into our all variable, like so, and then it'll move on to, the loop will move on to the next line in the collection of subway names. So that's pretty much it. Hopefully I can edit this up and post it with my project, and looking forward to the assessment.